Back in 2016, a paper dropped from Thomas Kipf and Max Welling that pretty much changed the game for how AI understands connected data. So today, we're going to dive into their groundbreaking work on graph convolutional networks.
So let's start with a big question here. Machine learning is absolutely incredible when it comes to understanding data in nice, neat tables, or looking at pixels in a picture. But what about the messy stuff? What about data that's all about its relationships, like who's friends with whom in a social network, or which scientific papers cite each other? How is an AI supposed to make sense of all those connections?
All right, so to really get why this paper was such a big deal, we gotta rewind a little bit and look at the major hurdle researchers were facing with this kind of network data. The specific problem they were tackling is called semi-supervised classification. So imagine this. You've got this gigantic web of scientific papers, all linking to each other. Your job is to label every single paper by its topic. Is it about physics, biology, computer science? The catch is, you've only had time to manually read and label a tiny, tiny handful of them. The whole goal is to use those few labeled papers to figure out what all the others are about.
Now, the old school way of thinking about this was pretty intuitive. It was basically a guilt by association rule. If one paper cites another, they're probably talking about the same thing. And while that makes sense on the surface, that assumption is actually really limiting, right? Because real-world connections are way more complicated than just things that are like connect. So before GCNs came along, you basically had two camps. First, there was that regularization method we just talked about, which really hammered home that similarity rule. Then you had this other approach using things like graph embeddings. Think of it like trying to give every node a set of coordinates on a giant map. But honestly, getting there involved these super clunky multi-step pipelines that were just a nightmare to get working right. The field was really crying out for something cleaner, something more powerful.
And this is where the breakthrough happens. Kipf and Welling came up with this beautifully simple, incredibly powerful idea, and they actually took their inspiration from the world of computer vision and convolutional neural networks.
Okay, here's the core idea, and it's just brilliant in its simplicity. For any single node you pick in the network, you just look at all of its direct friends, its neighbors, and you just average out their features. Then you take that averaged info and run it through a basic neural network layer. Boom. That output is the node's new, smarter representation. It's kind of like saying you are the average of your friends. Suddenly, the model isn't just seeing a node by itself anymore, it's seeing the node in the context of its entire local neighborhood. It's learning from relationships.
And what's really cool is what happens when you start stacking these simple layers on top of each other. If you have a two-layer GCN, it means a node isn't just learning from its direct friends, it's also learning from its friends of friends. Information starts to ripple out across the whole network, letting the model pick up on way more complex patterns and structures. All right, so the theory sounds great, right? But the real question is, does it actually work? This is where the GCN just totally crushed it. The authors didn't just talk the talk. They showed everyone how powerful this new model really was.
I mean, just look at these numbers from the paper. On these two big standard citation datasets, Cora and Citeseer, the GCN model hits 81.5% and 70.3% accuracy. We're not talking about a little bump here. This was a massive leap forward, blowing the previous state-of-the-art methods completely out of the water.
And this image, this right here, shows you why it works so well. Think of this as a map of the model's brain after it's been trained on that Cora dataset. Each color is a different subject for a paper. You can see, clear as day, how the model has learned to group similar papers together into these tight, separate clusters. And it did all that with only a tiny fraction of the labels. It's literally learning the hidden structure of science just from the citation links. To really see this clustering happen, let's watch it on a classic example, Zachary's Karate Club. It's a famous graph of a real-life social network in a karate club that's split into two factions. So check this out. After just 25 rounds of training, and we've only told it about one person from each side, you can already see the model starting to pull the two different social groups apart.
Now, let's fast forward to 75 iterations. Whoa, the gap between those clusters is getting way more obvious. The model is letting information flow across those friendship links, and it's using that network structure to literally push the two rival factions away from each other.
And here's the payoff. By 300 iterations, it's achieved an almost perfect separation of the communities. This is the whole point. With almost no help, it figured out the entire social structure of the club just by learning from the connections. That's the power we're talking about. So the impact of this simple, super efficient model was just huge. It didn't just beat a benchmark. It basically kicked off the entire field of modern graph machine learning as we know it. And this wasn't just some academic exercise. This foundational idea unlocked a whole universe of real-world applications. That recommendation engine on Amazon or Netflix, the AI systems discovering new drugs by looking at molecules, the systems that spot fraud in financial networks, even the knowledge graphs that power Google search. So many of these technologies can trace their roots right back to the ideas in this one paper. And you know what's really impressive? The authors were completely honest about what their model couldn't do. They pointed out that it struggled with really huge graphs and couldn't handle information on the connections themselves. And those very limitations they identified, they basically became a to-do list for the entire research community, directly sparking all the new work we see today in graph attention networks and other advanced methods. When you boil it all down, this paper's greatest gift was that it taught AI how to see and learn from the structure of relationships. It took us from looking at neat little tables into the messy, tangled, connected web of the real world, which, of course, leaves us all with a pretty big question to think about. This is for entertainment purposes only.